Hello, Brav. I know that I have probably half a dozen books now that I have not finished reading in their entirety, but I'm starting on at least three more today. This one is Robert M. Adams, Bad Mouth, Fugitive Papers on the Dark Side. I will give you a brief review of the introductory and then the preface, and then that will be all until chapter 1 next time. Bad Mouth, Fugitive Papers on the Dark Side by Robert M. Adams. Bad mouth is about the current exhaustion of our vocabulary of abuse, of horror, disgust, and negation. Because the modern imagination has relied so heavily on those themes. These themes, their increasing depletion and vulgarization, pose serious consequences for literary and plastic arts, of which Mr. Adams tries to suggest a few. From insults and invective, the author moves to a discussion of the ugly, and from there to meditations on the new art of political lying. He concludes with some thoughts on the modern obscene, as a set of effects so deadened by now as to be hard to achieve authentically, and on rags and garbage as prevailing metaphors of the modern condition. Ugly images and hateful expressions represent a last frontier for the imagination. Mr. Adams contemplates, not without gaiety, some of the consequence of reducing this frontier to a smudged and exhausted slum. Jacket illustration reprinted from Granville. Un autre monde. I really like this illustration. It's good. It's great. This book, I believe, was written in 1977. University of California Press. Yes, 1977. Language was given to man to conceal his thoughts. Ideas were given to man to prevent him from thinking. Let's take a look at Mr. Adams. He's a professor. He was, obviously, probably isn't alive at this point. Is a professor of English at the University of California, Los Angeles. His many books include After Joyce, The Roman Stamp, and a new translation of Machiavelli's Prince. Let's go to the preface. Though the studies making up this little collection... All right, we'll listen to the train for a second. Though the studies making up this little collection were not written to fit any particular schema, growing rather as a set of free variations on a gradually emerging theme, they do in fact form a pattern of sorts. The first two focus on the idea of counter-language, language used to hinder people or hurt them in a variety of symbolic and practical ways. Mostly quite familiar. The next two are concerned with language that deliberately violates standards of decency and standards of truth, such as survive, emphasizing the general prevalence of such language. They look into the consequences of its no longer being exceptional. The last two pieces, departing from a direct concern with language, devote themselves to what I sense as a new and autonomous status for the ugly in modern life. And with the frequent metaphors of rags, garbage, and excrement in which that ugliness finds expression. If the successive essays do not display, at least they suggest a wide range in the negative and hostile uses of language, both everyday and artistic, from light and occasional personal insult to total alienation from a culture and all its works. Implicit in the arrangement is a specific historical thesis, which I haven't tried to emphasize, but feel obliged to declare explicitly here. I think a big balance has shifted recently, say within the last 50 years. The lacerating and deliberately offensive mode in art and literature, which used to be very much a minority mode, very much an occasional and subordinate effect within a larger composition, is now predominant. Varieties of complicity and mutual accommodation between writer and reader or artist and viewer, which though tacit used to be widespread, if not universal, are now largely obsolete. The causes of this immense change, like its full consequences, are not beyond speculation, They are not the particular concern of cultural commentator. Quite possibly the world is deteriorating at an unprecedented clip. What used to be exceptional iniquity is now commonplace, and the disciplines of art and literature must strain their foulest resources to keep up with the realities of our precipitous slide into the abyss. Or alternatively, the world is very much what it always was. But old commonplaces and artistic conventions have been exhausted. Fashion requires something new, so artists and writers cast about for the nearest taboo to violate. Perhaps we should see the contemporary vogue for black humor, macabre sensationalism, and sordid fecality as the opening up of a more forceful and expressive vocabulary for the imagination. Perhaps we should see it in only the cultivation of short-term shock effects, very likely has something to do with the destruction, at least in their own self-definitions of old artistic and literary elites. The advent, for good, for evil, for inevitable, of audiences trained on comic books, television, and the movies. In any event, I am neither documenting nor describing here what I sense as a vast change in the cultural weather, far less explaining it, but simply assuming its existence as a background for some specifics. When one subject is so sweeping, there's no reason to be nice in the selection of examples. A random sampling across the board will serve the purpose of suggestion as well as any close arrangement of hard evidence. Supposing such were available, though I talk now of popular and now of literary usage, sometimes of formal art and sometimes of those loose habits known as folkways, the central interest of the study is nothing but vocabulary. By that I mean simply the repertoire of devices available to express or repress, divert or disguise what for shorthand's sake we can call our nasty authentic selves. If there's been a change in the cultural weather, it should show in our constitutive vocabulary, and if it shows in that vocabulary, it won't be long in altering our definitions of self. So far as I have a thesis, it can be cast in the form of a premise and an open-ended question. The art of modern living is the art of washing clean in dirty water. But if the language with which we measure clean and dirty is itself in question, what then? The subject may well be topical, as I think, but topicality is only an excuse, not a reason, for venturing down so dark a path. These are high-energy topics and refract through different personalities in diverse and revealing ways. There are sunlit personalities to whom the very thought of sitting down deliberately to discuss the vindictive and repugnant will be not so much disagreeable as incomprehensible and strange. Others will find the idea of talking decorously about ways of fracturing the decorums to be evasive and a fete in itself. I cannot pretend to be of one mind about my own venture. Destructive uses of language, fantasies of filth and horror and hatred, are deeply rooted in the instinctual nature, perhaps not of everybody, but of many of us. Yet I doubt if there's much to glory about in that fact. There's no exercising one's fate and having been born to a black imagination, a cutting tongue, and an instinct for bleak landscapes. But history, at her kindest, sometimes grants one a perspective, and with it a sense of communal rather than individual misfortune, such as passes in certain circles for comfort. In the course of turning and returning these nasty topics, I have acquired just enough experience with reactions to feel confident that few are unrevealing. None are universally persuasive, and the most interesting are sometimes the least coherent. Anyone who talks about the way we talk can't help becoming part of his own subject. Sometimes this puts one in the position of trying to open the refrigerator door fast enough to see if the light really goes off when it's shut. So much self-questioning may distress readers who have come to the book expecting to be told what to think about the subject. I'm afraid it cannot be helped. The theme is corrosive and can't be handed round in paper cups. The most one can hope is that laying out some intuitions about it will be provocative as well as provoking. Of the essays that follow, Dirty Stuff appeared in Columbia Forum for summer 1973. Ideas of Ugly and Rags and Garbage and Fantasy in Hudson Review for spring 1974. In spring 1976, Ugly has been substantially rewritten for this collection. The other two revised less drastically. I am grateful to the editors for permission to reprint. Santa Fe, New Mexico, December 7th, 1976. Robert M. Adams. And with that, I will close, and we'll be back with the first chapter at another time. Goodbye.